Greetings and welcome to the very first episode of Diver Dave. In this segment, we'll be diving into a freshwater lake in the northeastern United States to give you a detailed look at a fish known as the largemouth bass. These apex predators can reach a length of nearly 3 feet and weigh over 20 pounds, and their life expectancy is about 15 years. Largemouth bass hunt by ambushing their prey, so you'll often find them hiding near underwater cover where they use the element of surprise and speed to capture their prey. These aquatic carnivores have a diet that includes other fish, frogs, salamanders, snakes, crayfish, small turtles, small birds, worms, and insects. Large bass, such as the ones seen here, have a diet that consists primarily of other fish. The fish seen here is known as a bluegill. Bluegills are an important food source for the largemouth bass because they spawn repeatedly during the warm summer months, thus providing an abundance of small fish of many different sizes for the bass to feed on. These beautiful fish typically grow to a length of about 4 to 8 inches, but some bluegills can grow to nearly 1.5 feet in length. The largemouth bass, the smallmouth bass, the bluegill, and the pumpkin seed all belong to the same family of fish commonly known as the sunfish. A recent survey by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service shows that anglers in the United States spend more time fishing for largemouth bass than any other type of fish, making them the most popular game fish in the United States by far. Due to its popularity with anglers, the largemouth bass has been intentionally introduced into freshwater environments all around the globe, making it one of the top 10 most introduced freshwater fish in the world. Introduction of the largemouth bass into habitats outside of its natural range can cause adverse ecological impacts such as the decline, displacement, or even the outright extinction of native species. These losses can occur directly through predation or indirectly by outcompeting native species for vital space and food. The largemouth bass can be found in a wide variety of freshwater lakes, rivers, and ponds. They prefer relatively still water with a thick growth of aquatic vegetation and an abundance of other underwater cover from which to ambush their prey. In the spring, when the water temperatures climb into the mid-50s, the bass begin to move from their winter holding places in the deeper parts of the lake and start to take up residence in the shallow coves near the shore where the water is much warmer. The warm water ramps up their metabolism and gets them ready for the spawning season. They come out of their winter holding areas hungry and on the move, looking for food. When the water temperatures in the lake increase to around the 60-degree mark, the male bass will select a nesting site for the eggs. This site is sometimes referred to as a bed. Largemouth bass typically choose a bed near shore where the water is about 1 to 4 feet deep. The spawning site usually contains sand or stones on which to place the eggs, but these details can vary widely depending on the specific habitat. The spawning site is cleared of debris using powerful strokes of the male's tail fin. Once the bed is complete, the male bass will begin searching for a receptive female. Largemouth bass normally spawn when the water temperatures reach between 65 to 75 degrees, and female bass such as the one seen here can spawn with multiple males at different nesting sites to ensure greater reproductive success. Once spawning is complete, the male protects the eggs and cares for them until they hatch, which, depending on water temperature, can take up to 2 weeks or more. This is a male largemouth bass, and he's busy tending to a small group of eggs. He keeps the eggs clean and oxygenated by fanning them with his fins, and he'll aggressively defend the nest if an intruder gets too close. Unfortunately, most of these eggs have developed a fungus, but he hasn't given up all hope just yet. Male bass are very serious about their parental responsibilities. In fact, they're so committed to their offspring that they don't even eat when they're spawning and tending to their young. So after they spawn, male bass can sometimes go weeks without eating. The physical demands on the male during the spawning season are so great that some males only spawn every other year, and some even die from exhaustion. Now let's take a closer look at those eggs. There are probably a few good eggs in here, but this brood is definitely a complete loss, and hunger will eventually force this male to abandon the nest and begin feeding once again. While this particular spawn didn't work out, there are many fish in this lake, and just like clockwork, every spring it comes alive with swarms of baby fish. Here we see a male bass protecting a large cloud of fry that must number in the thousands. The fry are constantly on the move, swimming through the water column in search of tiny aquatic animals such as Daphnia, Cyclops, and rotifers. These tiny animals, along with many others, are collectively known as zooplankton. The tiny translucent fry are perfectly camouflaged to blend in with their environment, so it's difficult to see them all at once and truly appreciate just how many fry there are in this group. Bass are very object-oriented fish, and this submerged tree stump seems to be at the center of their territory. So the eggs were probably laid somewhere near this spot. The bright red animal that just entered the scene is a tiny aquatic mite. This brightly colored relative of the spider has 8 legs and is completely aquatic. These little mites must not be very good to eat because they're able to swim around the lake and nothing seems to bother them. This bluegill, on the other hand, is a completely different story. Bluegills are always cruising the perimeter looking for an easy meal, and many largemouth bass eggs as well as fry are lost due to predation by bluegills and other sunfish, so this male has to keep a close eye on his children at all times. These tiny fry live in a complex and often dangerous world where they constantly have to balance the need to eat with the need to avoid being eaten. And in these northern waters, the fry are in a race against time to eat as much as they can in order to gain the necessary fat reserves to sustain them through the lean winter months ahead. Most of these fry won't make it to see winter, and the odds of one of them living long enough to reproduce is extremely low. I believe it's somewhere around 1 in 1,000 fry will live to reach sexual maturity in about 2 years from now. Nonetheless, if they survive, these bass fry will reach a length of about 2 to 3 inches by the end of summer, and by that time they will have switched to a diet consisting mostly of smaller fish. Those small fish may also include eating a smaller brother or sister who has failed to keep up. So, as they mature, the large swarm of fry will begin to break up into smaller groups based on size, and this reduces cannibalism between the fry. At 1.5 to 2 inches in length, they will have the characteristic coloration and patterning of a mature largemouth bass. Here, a small group of young bass explores this rocky outcrop looking for a meal. Largemouth bass are fairly social creatures, and even as adults, they'll often travel together in small groups based on size. This group of 3 bass has 6 eyes to look for danger instead of just 2. Some of the things that they have to look out for include great blue herons, otters, chain pickerel, snapping turtles, painted turtles, American eels, northern water snakes, humans, and even other bass, because this large female will eat those little bass if she gets the chance. Her size, her speed, and most of all her intelligence make her a very serious threat to small fish. And anyone who's ever spent any time trying to catch a really big bass knows that they are very smart fish. In fact, largemouth bass are known to be the most intelligent of all of the game fish. They can learn to recognize and avoid specific lures that have hooked them in the past, and they learn quickly, sometimes after only a single painful encounter. So, in any given body of water, some of the more commonly used lures can lose their effectiveness over time as more and more bass learn to recognize and avoid them. And the smaller the body of water, the sooner this occurs. In such cases, a lure with an unfamiliar design and movement can sometimes produce better results. Bass can also remember where they spawned in previous seasons, and they travel along well-established routes that are used daily for feeding, as well as seasonally for breeding and thermoregulation. They rely on their sense of smell along with visual cues in the aquascape to help them find their way. In one scientific study, radio-tagged bass were captured and intentionally relocated over a mile away in a different part of the lake. Surprisingly, many of the bass in the study returned to their original capture site within a day or two. By most accounts, fish have a much better memory than we give them credit for, and I've seen this firsthand during the many years that I've been diving and filming in this lake. These fish know me, and year after year, they become more and more accustomed to seeing me in the water. The larger fish, such as these bass, are very curious and far less afraid of me than the smaller sunfish. Which makes sense because the smaller species are used to being hunted, so they're a bit more shy, while the bass are the apex predators in this lake, so they're used to being the hunters. And the differences in their behaviors are appropriate for their particular place in the food chain. These sunfish know they're too big for the bass to eat, so they're much more afraid of me than they are of him. The largemouth bass are obviously the intellectuals in this crowd, and they're very curious about everything that's going on around them. For the last 3 years, one very friendly female bass seems to remember me from one year to the next. Every time I'm in the lake, she follows me, refusing to let other fish near me and chasing them off if they get too close. She's easy to recognize among the other bass because she has a noticeable split in her right pectoral fin as well as a split in her left ventral fin. Once we find each other, she follows me as I move through the lake, and every curious bass that comes near me is promptly chased away. I'd like to give her a name, but I don't want to get too attached. There are a lot of people who fish in this lake that would love to catch a fish like her. If someone were to catch her, hopefully they'd release her back into the lake where she belongs, and then hopefully she'd learn to recognize that particular lure so that it could never trick her like that again. In theory, each time you catch and release a bass, it learns. So if we consistently catch and then release these beautiful fish, eventually we'd have some really large, really smart fish that would become increasingly difficult to catch. Big bass are usually smart because they don't get big by being foolish. However, just like the human population, not all bass have the same capacity to learn from their experiences. Fortunately for us, every once in a while we come across a particular fish that seems to be a little more special than the rest. And this overly protective female bass is precisely that type of fish. Contrary to popular belief, fish do feel pain and they can remember places, events, and even people for long periods of time. This particular fish remembers me year after year, and I wonder what she's thinking as she watches me swim beside her. I think that she's learned by now that I don't mean her any harm, so she lets me get really close to her, but I think it's something more than that. I think she likes spending time with me. Or maybe these fish are playing a game. We tend to underestimate the intelligence as well as the value of creatures that we don't understand. Hopefully this video changes that, and it gives you a deeper appreciation as well as a better understanding of the largemouth bass. I really hope that she survives the coming winter so that I can join her in the lake again next summer. Because sometimes you can look into the eyes of a fish and feel something more than you expected.